Well, it's a new day, which means I need to find something new to get angry about, and fast. The question is, though, what should it be? Here we go. Why the hell do you cost money?
One video game. How much are you willing to pay for it? Which game, you ask? Well, it doesn't f***ing matter, apparently. Ever since the dawn of the Wii U era, the vast majority of first-party Nintendo games have been priced at the oh-so-familiar $59.99. Even before the Wii U era, both Xbox and PlayStation had already adopted this price point, and it has remained that way to this day.
Will I sound smart if I say I saw this coming?
People have been arguing about the quote-unquote correct number to put on the sticker for a game since the dawn of time, and as far as I can tell, we still haven't reached a conclusion. The subject has been a victim to plenty of controversy, especially when it comes to Nintendo, and even more especially in the past few years. By no means is this the biggest controversy in gaming history, but it has been a hot topic of conversation quite a few times. Just like with most things, two sides formed in regards to this discussion. One side complains that a game is too expensive in comparison to how much content or quality or whatever it offers. The other side tries to justify the price with various reasons, or what some may call excuses.
But hey, you didn't hear that from me.
So, am I here to settle this age-old argument once and for all? Well, the answer to that question is the same one I got when I asked the bank teller if they were okay with me robbing them.
No.
What I am going to do, though, is try to explain why I think so many of these games aren't priced in a way that makes the most sense. In my opinion, the entire concept of pricing all first-party games the same is flawed in and of itself, but I'm sure you already gathered that. So, like I said, just about every first-party release that this company puts out adopts the price point of $59.99, but let's add a penny so I don't have to talk as much. There are a few exceptions to this rule, such as WarioWare Get It Together, Nintendo Switch Sports, and Game Builder Garage, but well, hopefully you know what exception means. The thing is, though, all of these games priced at $60 come from a variety of genres, offering up a huge range in total gameplay hours, differing replay values, etc, etc. Is it really reasonable to think that all of them hold the exact same monetary value? Well, let's ask the bank teller again.
I'm calling the police.
That's bank teller language for no. Complaining about the price of things is easy though. Instead, let's take it a step further and try to come up with as many excuses as possible that explain away the price of a game. I mean, it's only fair to do so, right? So the first and most obvious factor is the cost to produce the game. This includes paying all the developers, providing their equipment, maintaining the building they work in, on top of any other additional costs that directly involve the employees or production in general. Secondly, there's the cost to market the game. This includes creating the trailers, placing advertisements across various forms of media, and even paying the intern to make posts about it on the company's social media. But most of the time, that last cost is optional, apparently.
My future employer is gonna love that I wrote tweets for 6 months.
Then there's the cost to manufacture the physical copies of the games. However, this doesn't exclusively include making the game box and cartridge. You also have to include shipping costs, any deals with specific retailers that offer pre-order bonuses or merchandise, and even things like promotional material such as posters, cardboard cutouts, and the like. Though this could easily be bundled in with advertisements as well. Now, I'm sure I missed something in there in regards to the full cost, but this isn't a fucking shareholders meeting, I'm just putting it into perspective. Now that I've mentioned physical copies of games, the next point of discussion is probably pretty obvious, and if it isn't obvious to you, then here's a big graphic that'll make it super clear. Digital games versus physical games. Yet another age-old argument, or at least as old as the year where digital games became a thing. The discussion has sparked concerns over game preservation, DRM issues, and much, much more, but that's not exactly relevant here. Instead, let's think about whether Nintendo would want you to buy games digitally or physically.
Will I sound stupid if I answer a rhetorical question?
Digital games require virtually zero cost to distribute compared to physical ones. They don't have to manufacture any game cases, print any box art, or ship them out to various retailers. All they have to do is host the servers that allow people to download the games themselves, and Nintendo even took it a step further, cutting costs even more by making their own servers perform like dog shit. It's not like it matters or anything. With that said, it's probably blatantly obvious that Nintendo would prefer you purchase games in a digital format. In addition, digital games also offer up much more convenience to the consumer. Mostly because since they're installed directly to your system, you don't have to worry about inserting and ejecting any of those pesky cartridges. Or worry about where you're going to store them along with their admittedly extremely oversized cases. If it were a few years ago, I'd also say they don't have to go through the trouble of printing the manuals and other material that goes inside the game case itself, but yeah, that's not really a thing anymore. At least we're murdering less trees. Next, we could try not destroying the atmosphere. Maybe digital isn't that bad after all.
Alright, so if you had to choose between the preservation of video game history or our planet, which one are you picking? What the kind of question is that? You don't need a planet to play Jimmy Houston's Bass Tournament USA.
Either way, this still doesn't answer the question as to why almost all of these games continue to release with a $60 price tag. Well, I can think of one reason. But why exactly 60? Why not 65 or 55? Well, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I don't know why. Probably because everyone else is doing it. The corporate world is just a big game of follow the leader, with an astronomically minuscule amount of innovation thrown in every few years to spice things up. So that's the most logical explanation I have, though in the grand scheme of this discussion, exact numbers don't really matter. What we really should be talking about is why that number remains so static, no matter the situation. Obviously, games would sell better if they were listed at a lower price, but a lower price means a lower profit, and we all know that's a no-no in the business world. However, that still begs another question. Could some games turn a larger profit selling at a lower price than they would being sold at the standard price? Now, I'm no briefcase holding whack job, but I think the answer to that is yes. Some games just aren't as exciting or compelling to the average person, and you're raising the barrier to entry by pricing it in a way that scares most people away from even giving it a chance. Certain games don't draw people as heavily for a variety of reasons, such as the genre, popularity of the series, difficulty, or even just how it looks.
Hey, you want to try out this new Kirby game with me? The new what? Oh, no! Why do you always have to play games that are so damn political?
Some people, including myself, are even willing to pay more than $60 for a certain small set of games that we think are worth the increased price point, but that may be a minefield of a conversation for some people, even worse than what we've already been saying. Regardless, one thing I am adamant about is suggesting the discontinuation of this arbitrary pricing altogether, so that games aren't essentially expected to adopt the most popular pricing model at the time. And yes, I am aware that plenty of games do not follow the most popular pricing model, but in the realm of first-party Nintendo games, the trend is definitely there. What should determine the price of a game, though? There are so many factors that contribute to someone's perceived value of them, and that's what makes this question so difficult to answer, but I'm sure as hell still gonna try. The first criteria most people jump to is the hours to dollars ratio. How many hours of gameplay do you get out of each dollar you spent on the game? I'm gonna stop right there though, because anyone with more than 3.5 brain cells could tell you that it isn't that simple. While I do think there is a considerable amount of merit associated with this criteria, it's definitely not the end-all be-all of video game pricing factors. For example, if you take two games that both cost $60, but one of them takes an average of around 60 hours to fully complete while the other takes nearly 200, does the game that takes longer immediately hold more value than the other? Most people would say no. They would have questions about the quality of the games, what genre they were in, and whatever else is important that I can't think of right now. These two theoretical games that I mentioned are actually Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild, the two most critically acclaimed titles ever released for the Nintendo Switch. At least in the eyes of critics, quality is not an issue with either of these titles, and I've never personally seen anyone claim that Super Mario Odyssey is overpriced. So, could you say that the quality of the game determines the price? After all, these games come from two entirely different genres, and different genres are usually known to have varying average playtimes. Then again though, quality can be highly subjective. There are some people that hate both of these games, and you especially can't expect a company/developer to gauge the quality of a game they made and price it accordingly.
Alright people, so on a scale of 1 to Incredible Hulk for Nintendo DS, what are we rating this game here?
I'd probably give it a 7.
Yeah, same. Got it. So I think we'll put this one at $39.99.
Now hold on! There's no way it's that good.
Nobody asked you, dipshit! You gave Ocarina of Time a 2!
You know what? I have had it with you picking on me all the time.
This guy really does not get it.
I don't get it, huh? Well, here's what you don't get, Phil. I slept with your wife. Multiple times.
Oh, what?
Even if a game's average total hours for a playthrough are low, that doesn't necessarily mean a person's overall playtime is going to directly correlate. Some games simply never end, most notably in the sandbox genre. Other games are extremely replayable because of things like multiple endings, procedural generation or randomization, and the like. Even then though, the quality discussion gets brought up again. How engaging can these games remain to the player after any exorbitant number of hours? For example, even if we look outside of the sandbox and never-ending game sphere, Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition has an absolute wealth of content to complete, clocking in at an average completion time of around 400 hours. If you've played any Warriors game before though, you would know that the vast majority of the game's content always lies in an extremely repetitive gameplay loop that basically boils down to kill lots of stuff. For most people, they complete the main story, try out all the modes, and do a few extras until they get bored. And yes, you will get bored, no doubt about it. Eventually, the gameplay just starts to feel mundane, so continuing just isn't appealing to the average person. The content is there for the player to consume, but most people won't see it all because of the reasons I mentioned. So is the price still justified? This criteria, once again, just leaves us with more questions than answers. Another argument I see brought up often in regards to unfair pricing is whether or not the game is a re-release, meaning it was previously present on another console. Hopefully you gathered that. The most common response to this is that re-releases of games should be sold at a lower price point than brand new games. However, as you may have guessed, there's plenty of nuance in this argument as well. Personally, I would split re-releases up into 3 categories, that being ports, remasters, and remakes. Ports are when you take a game from one console and simply just put it on the other. This can be done by transferring the code directly and allowing the game to run natively on the new console, or by simply emulating it, which, if you live under a rock and don't know what that means, here's an explanation.
Look! I'm playing Super Mario on the computer!
In the vast majority of cases, ports take the least amount of time and effort to make, especially if they're emulated. In turn, many people have argued that they shouldn't be sold at the same price as brand new releases, which makes sense, right? One of the more recent cases of this was with Super Mario 3D All-Stars, which I feel gross even talking about this game because of how run into the ground all discussion surrounding it is, but the game was a collection of 3D Mario games that included Super Mario 64, Sunshine, and Galaxy. All 3 of these titles were ported with 0 additions or improvements other than an upscale in graphics and higher resolution UI elements. Oh yeah, and there was an extremely bare-bones music player included on the game select screen.
I just love having absolutely 0 control over my playback. No fast forward, no rewind, not even a pause button. We're keeping it simple, and I'm enjoying it.
On top of this, both 64 and Sunshine were just straight up emulated. This game sold for $60. These are all full-fledged 3D Mario games, so you could make the argument that it's 3 games selling for $20 each, but since the effort appeared to be so low with the collection, saying that just sounds like mental gymnastics to justify your purchase. Regardless, I'm trying to stay neutral here, so forget I said that. Next on the list are remasters. In most cases, these types of re-releases simply amount to a fresh new coat of paint. New textures, maybe some models are remade, the music re-recorded with a new or updated feel, you know, just smoothing out the jagged edges and such, maybe adding a few small features here and there. Notably, this type of re-release is a considerably large step above a port in terms of the amount of work required to create them, though obviously still less than creating a new game altogether. This is also where we start to see the definitions of everything sort of bleed into each other, as remasters are often just ports with new textures, models, and music, while some ports have minor elements of a remaster within them. Many times it's up for interpretation, creating yet another argument that even further darkens the skies of the pricing controversy. A good example of a remaster on Switch would probably be Miitopia. Originally released on the 3DS, Miitopia was a dumbed-down RPG adventure featuring, you guessed it, Miis. The game then later came to Switch in 2021 with an HD overhaul and a couple new features such as wigs and makeup customization, adding a horse as a party member, outings to strengthen relationships with other party members, and a few other minor features. In reality, the new features were definitely welcome additions, but most people didn't think they were enough to justify purchasing the game a second time, especially at the normal Switch price point.
Hold on a second. What did you say? That game actually sold for $50.
All you need to know is that the game sold for $10 more than it did originally on the 3DS, and that's bad. Don't worry about anything else. Okay, fine. Let's do another example. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD. You can tell it's a remaster by looking at the name. See? It's right there. HD. It stands for, hey, did you know that this game is a remaster? Skyward Sword HD upscaled textures, added a few quality of life improvements, and added amiibo support. Is anyone else not frothing at the mouth to purchase this? Needless to say, people weren't super willing to pay the $60 with this one. And finally, we have remakes. These are complete from-the-ground-up reconstructions of the source game that can drastically overhaul just about any aspect of the experience. The scope of these can vary widely, but it's not very necessary to explain the sheer variety anyway. Let me just give an example. The Game Boy classic Link's Awakening was completely remade for the Switch with a completely new look and sound, obviously, along with improved controls, quality of life improvements, and even a new dungeon building side mode. With a remake on this scale, most people were fine with the price, even though it happened to be one of the shortest Zelda games ever made. But we once again run into that pesky concept of subjectivity. It's also important to note that these definitions are my own, and the line between each type of re-release is also yet another thing filthy gamers love to argue over, so try not to lose it. Something that every re-release has in common, however, is the fact that they are being released again. Sorry for blowing your mind there. People have played these games before. If there isn't enough there to justify them playing through it again, they just won't be interested, creating yet another instance of a fair price point being extremely difficult to agree upon, especially since in this case, well, there are some people that haven't played these games before. Can you see where the divide usually falls yet?
I've never played this, so it's like a new game to me. I played through the original 7 times. I bought this anyway and have zero intention of ever putting the cartridge in my system.
If you haven't realized by now, every single determinant for a game's perceived dollar value will lead us to a roadblock eventually. There's no avoiding it. It really just makes sense to price everything the exact same. It's simply easier that way, but going back to what I said earlier, I truly think that some games would turn larger profits if their prices were adjusted more so on a case-by-case basis, not to mention the benefits to the consumer. Just for a second though, I do want to inject just a little bit of my completely invalid opinion into the conversation. I personally believe that some games really are a no-brainer when it comes to the argument over whether or not they are unfairly priced. Here comes my completely personal and subjective example. Brace yourselves. Here goes. I don't think that most Mario Sports or Mario multiplayer focused games on the Switch are worth $60 at all. Games like Super Rush, Aces, and Battle League just showcase a complete lack of content for single players and a complete lack of variety or substance for people playing multiplayer or online. While it is true that these games do never end, their lack of depth, unique content, and overall engagement simply doesn't justify the price for me. I would be much more willing to purchase these titles if they were priced at around $30 or $40, and especially since they appeal to the casual audience heavily, I believe it would make individuals in that crowd much more likely to purchase the game at all. Going back to my reference of barriers to entry. But once again, that's just my completely invalid opinion. Please, entirely disregard everything I just said. This game is great though, worth every penny. When it's all said and done though, each of these criteria for video game pricing has at least some amount of merit. Considering all of them when valuing a game instead of each one individually is most likely going to be the best course of action when it comes to making these decisions. Either way, like I've already mentioned, what we've really been doing here is simply wading through a sea of subjectivity and nuance, desperately trying to find definitive answers to our burning questions about the pricing of Nintendo games. And you know what we learned at the end of the day?
Nothing. I just rambled for nearly 20 minutes and we still have zero answers.